Welcome to routerforums.com member video series.
Hi there, I'm Harry Sinclair, known on router forums as Harrysin, and this is my shop, or as we say down under, my shed. I've been wood and metalworking, I suppose, since Adam was a boy, as far back as I can remember. Over the years I've made all kinds of furniture, but since retirement in 2000 I've concentrated on small projects like trinket and jewellery boxes, many kinds of clocks, and a couple of years ago I bought a mini lathe. And whilst I'm far from being an expert, because of enormous help from fellow Router Forum members, I've been improving at a steady rate, starting with pens and progressing to bowls and vases. I enjoy passing my knowledge on to others, and in fact take many photographs during the making of many of my projects, then add explanatory text and post them on Router Forums. My favourite router is the Makita 3612C, and because so little has been written about the use of plunge routers using template guides and templates, many of my projects show how to design and make templates and end up with a completed project. One other aspect of routing about which very little, if anything, has been written is mounting the router on skis, and I have demonstrated this in many of my threads on Router Forums. The following video, in fact, shows the making of a set of router skis. This photograph shows one of my Makita routers mounted on skis. These are the skis that I'm about to make and talk about. This shot shows a piece of 3/4 inch melamine coated MDF which happened to be salvaged from a roadside skip. The lines have been marked, leaving two clear areas measuring 12 by 4 3/4 inches, and the edges being cut on the bandsaw. We've now marked two vertical lines 2 inches from the edge. I should mention here that the shape and size of the ski ends is not critical, not even important. The only part that will be important will be the width and spacing of slots, which will be shown later. Notice now that I've added a couple of additional lines. These are 2 inches from the edge, but again, not at all critical. We now need some radii. It's not necessary to get out the compass. Use whatever you've got at hand, like the coffee cup shown here. Here we see the slots marked for width and length. Width and length to suit your particular router. In this case, the width being 3/8 to suit the threaded rods which we'll be making at a later stage to suit one of my Makita routers. This step isn't really necessary, but it will save sanding the ends later. Here the board is being squared up on the sacrificial bench top prior to routing the slots. This shot clearly shows the simple method that I use to hold material firmly onto the sacrificial tabletop. Just 4 pieces of scrap pinned around the board. We've now screwed 2 rails parallel to the board. The spacing isn't important so long as the router is capable of being moved on the rails so that the bit can sit above the 2 positions where the slots are to be routed. What is important is that there isn't any side play, but not so much pressure so that the end cheeks won't slide. Here we see that the router has been slid along the rails to where the bit is lined up with the marks. This $2 light fitted to the router makes a huge difference, as does using a router with a large opening. Here we see how I adjust the depth of cut. First, the router is plunged so that the bit is just touching the material, and then it's locked into this position. Next, use an offcut from the board and fit it between the anvil and adjusting screw. Finally, increase the gap by about half a turn. This will ensure that the bit penetrates the material. The router is now unlocked and the groove is routed by plunging the router approximately 1/4 of an inch for each of 3 cuts, clearing the waste away after each cut. That's one end piece with slots completed. I could, of course, and in hindsight probably should have routed both left slots then right slots. It would have saved moving the router along the rails, but no matter, it worked out fine. Oh dear, look what I've done. I'm sure you've all noticed what a moment's lapse in concentration can result in. The left lower slot has gone too far. I've now got 2 choices: start from scratch or fix the error. I'll attempt to fix the error. I cut a strip of the waste material a fraction wider than the slot, and I've sanded it for a good fit. I rounded the top on the disc sander. This shot shows the patch having been glued into position. The small gap at the top most likely will be removed when the pieces are separated. This time I'm going to be careful to stop at the correct line. That looks much better. The next step is to separate the pieces. Here I'm using the bandsaw, but the table saw, jigsaw, or even at a pinch a hard-point handsaw would do a good job. I'm going to cut the shapes on the bandsaw, but a jigsaw would be fine. I do intend to cut them individually, however, to ensure that they're both identical and to minimise sanding, one could easily stick the 2 together with a few pieces of double-sided tape. Sanding has now been completed and a rather sexy shape made to the lower curves. This shot is out of sequence as shown by the painted edges. The rods, which I'll add a few shots of their making later, can be seen in the background. This is how the sexy curves were achieved on the end of the belt sander. The edging strip is being applied with a hot air gun, but after this project was completed, I bought my wife a new iron so that I could keep her old one in the shed. Using an iron is far easier than using a heat gun. Here we see a simple way to trim excess edging strip. There are devices available which contain a couple of razor blades, and that makes this task even easier, but I don't currently have one of these. A couple of coats of white lacquer will complete this part of the project. The next few shots will show how I make the rods, but for those without a lathe or access to one, or even to a friend of a friend who has one, then I'm sure that an engineering shop wouldn't charge much to make a pair of rods. Some members of routerforums.com have used all thread, still others aluminium extrusions, but I do believe that mild steel looks the part as well as performing perfectly, and as shown are quick and easy to adjust the height. For showing the making of the rods, here is a shot of the completed skis, which I hope will be well used by the member of routerforums.com to whom I shall be giving them. I have presented a thread on routerforums.com showing the making of the illuminated router base, which is attached to the router as shown. This makes a huge difference because it makes possible to see exactly what the bit is doing. One important point: the skis are operated by the end cheeks. This gives a great deal of mechanical advantage, giving total control to the operator. These two bright mild steel rods are 12 mm in diameter to suit the Makita 3600BR and the 3612 and 3612C, the variable speed version, and are 27.5 inches long, which allows the setup to perform many tasks, some that would be difficult if not impossible by other means, yet they do not sag even with such heavy routers. The 12 mm rod has been reduced in diameter to 3/8 of an inch for a length of 1¼ inches. This is to take a 3/8 by 16 TPI thread. Here is the thread which was made using a die. Here is one of the completed rods. There's no reason why 2 or possibly even 3 different length rods shouldn't be made in order to optimize the skis for specific uses. However, I've personally never found it to be necessary in the 11 years that I've been using an identical ski to that which you've just seen me make. One final comment. The method of construction shown here is probably the quickest method where just one pair of end cheeks is required, and that probably means for most woodworkers. However, if several are to be produced, then making a template would well be worthwhile, as the cheeks could then be fully routed and all would be identical. It's been brought to my attention that I have demonstrated routing the slots using a ski setup, when in fact the viewer at this stage would not of course have a set of skis. Knowing from experience that woodworkers generally are pretty resourceful people, I'll post a few shots to give you an idea as to how it can be done without skis, and I'm sure that each woodworker will find a way to suit their own facilities.
Be sure to check out other member videos in the videos section at routerforums.com/videos.